The story of humankind is the story of migration. So Reimagining Migration, it's a new organization, actually, and what we're trying to do is create educational settings where immigrant origin youth and their peers can really thrive together academically, socially, and civically. And so that means it's helping educators think about what they can do to make schools more responsive to immigrant origin kids, but also starting to think about what are the habits that we need to inculcate among kids who are both immigrant origin and folks who are their peers. Like, what do they need to learn about the history of migration? One of the things that occurs to us is when we have a broad view of our history, that actually migration is our shared experience of humans, as humans, but it's actually rarely taught that way. We think about migration as the exception. It's actually the norm. And what would it take to shift? What would it be for us to reimagine the role of migration in our history, in the sciences, to give us a broader perspective? So when we have contemporary challenges around inclusion and exclusion, we have some perspectives. So if we're thinking about really common misperceptions of immigrants, I think it starts with a foundational failure to recognize immigrants as humans like other humans in previous generations, with similar desires, similar hopes, similar dreams, leaving similar things. It's really clear that the digital space has been used to convey and carry and spread a lot of prejudice. And this is a real challenge because we live in digital worlds in our own filtered bubble communities, right? So we tend not to have a lot of folks who aren't already part of our network. So it's tough to find, just as a starting place, it's tough to have folks who challenge your points of view if they're not part of your own social network. So that's number one. And then it's amazing when you start to see the same thing on a feed again and again and again. It just must be true because I've now encountered the same talk 6 or 7 times. So how do you challenge that when it's full of bigotry and bias? One of the biggest challenges we have is the digital space has not been a space for a lot of rational argument and fact checking, right? I mean, there are best habits, but it's not what we practice all often. So one of the things that's really clear is that in the digital space, stories really matter, and storytelling really matters, and personal connections can really matter. So why is it so important for people to share each other's stories? We'll find that newcomers and then folks who are here generations ago will find familiar patterns and deeper sense of connection that bond us together. It requires us to think more deeply about our own family's stories and the stories of our neighbors and the story of the people we admire. We have these ideas that there's good immigrants and there's bad immigrants and there's legal immigrants and there's illegal immigrants. That requires us really to know our history a little bit better. The immigration system that we think we know is new. It's a creation of laws that have accumulated over time. So the idea that there are undocumented immigrants, you couldn't come to the country as a documented immigrant before 1924 because that's not what was required. You didn't have to have these same kind of papers to come to the United States. That's only after 1924. And between 24 and 65, there's such a limit on immigrants coming to this country anyway, that most of our families, I guess it's about 40% of Americans can trace their ancestry through Ellis Island at some point. And those are families who came before there was any such thing as kind of legal immigration. We have to recognize that people migrate for all sorts of reasons, right? There are folks who immigrate seeking a better life, and right, they're seeking a better economic opportunity, and that's an intention, and they've come and they're doing that. There are folks who are fleeing poverty, there are folks seeking an education, there are folks trying to flee kind of cultural systems that they find repressive or restrictive. There are people who leave for those reasons. There are people who leave countries for love, right? There are also folks who don't ever intend to leave, who've been forced to migrate. Those are stories of forced migration. That's part of the history of slavery in this country. That's a story of refugees. Refugees are not trying to leave. As a matter of fact, most refugees, even when they're forced out of their countries, in their homes, try to stay as close as possible because they would like to return to their homes at some point. And so I think it's important to recognize that not everybody migrates by choice. Increasingly, people are migrating because of climate change. And catastrophic climate change is forcing people to flee. I have a niece who had to flee Houston because of the floods, and she's never coming back. So often we think, oh, that's happening in Asia somewhere. That's actually happening in the United States. So let's recognize the whole broad array of reasons that people come to this country. It's important because maybe if we recognize that people are fleeing because they don't have a choice to stay home, we might be more sympathetic to their experiences.